moved here from New York City 6 months ago, and I've been living here for about 5 months. And the one thing that I've been so present to right now is that this room right here is filled with future TED speakers. Right here. It's been so amazing to be here after coming from the East Coast and seeing the amazing ideas that are out here. So I want for you guys to just see this could be an event that you remember as when you created that talk, the beginning of that talk that you gave at TEDx, whatever, or at TED. Okay? So how many of you guys have actually attended a TED Talk or a TED conference or TEDx? Okay, so there's a couple of you. Okay, great. Now, who actually is interested in organizing TED also? Anyone here? Okay, cool. Great. But it sounds like most of you are here to learn how to do a talk. Okay. So here is my thing. I've been here in Silicon Valley with peak focus, and I'm building smartwatches like Jim said, but I also organize TEDxBushwick in New York City, which is a TEDx event. Now the difference between TED and TEDx is a local event, and I'll go into that more. But what I'm going to give you today is the things that organizers see and how you can get past all of the people who are auditioning. And there's so many people, and it is like an audition. TED is like a show. That's one of the biggest things to learn. It's not a lecture. And a lot of people here come from an academic or science background, and you're going to see the way to get to actually be on stage is to treat it like it's an audition. And that sounds scary, but I'm going to teach you a really easy way to get through that. And I have a degree in developmental psychology from Harvard. So I'm going to give you some brain-based tips that's going to really help you to make your talk easy to deliver and easy to connect with people. Now I have a lot of experience as speaker and pitch coaching as well, so I'm going to be running more of these workshops, just so you know. Now, what is TED? It stands for Technology, Education, and Design. But the most important thing about it is that it's about ideas worth sharing. So a lot of the TED Talks you'll see on TED.com don't necessarily have a specific tie to these things, but they're inspiring talks. So this is how we're going to do it. Now, something to understand is that TEDx organizers, a lot of people think they're just, people, just anyone picked off this, picked off the street. But the TED actually really has a very high standard for people who get licenses. You have to have a license to organize a TEDx. So people who are organizing TEDx already have been through the grill. Like I got so grilled by TED before I got my license. So because of that, I'm really grilling the people who are auditioning. So I'm going to teach you some tips that will help you get past. But one of the most important things you got to do is you need to be persistent, meaning don't just send your idea to the organizer. Really try to connect with them. Find a way to connect with them and see who they are. Get them to communicate. And people who write me and call me, those are the people I really pay attention to. And the other thing is really be extraordinary. And that can be interpreted in a lot of different ways. If you wanted to organize a TEDx, it's not something that you can organize around a local organization. It's got to be around a geographic area. So I'll give you a hint. We can't have TEDx Rainbow, but we can have TEDx Cupertino. And if you're interested in organizing a TED Talk, that's actually something to go for because TEDx Cupertino does not exist yet. The other exceptions to that are universities and large organizations, and I mean large organizations like the UN. So generally, you should try and stick with a geographic area. Okay. So this is the different things that I brought to share my being extraordinary with TED so that it would let me have a license. Get really present with who you are and don't be afraid to brag because you need to be so ready to bring it. This stage is, I'm sure you all know, filled with people who are amazing and are doing world-changing things. Now, I don't want you guys to doubt that you're one of those people, because you're in this room. You are one of those people. This is a special place, Rainbow. And that you knew about this workshop. There's something there for you. So let's get to the exercise. Now, the most important and entertaining tool you have in your toolbox is very simple. It's a story. A simple story. So we all tell stories, right? Everyone has like the story you tell all the time about the time that your dog threw up on your boyfriend, or like different kinds of things. And so the thing you may not know is that our brain is actually made for stories. What I mean by that is stories lead to a 3-phase process of becoming an actual structure in your brain. So when you tell a story, people remember it, you remember it, and the organizer who is looking at your talk will remember it. So if you are wanting to create a talk, a TED Talk, if you only remembered one thing from this entire workshop, it's tell a story. Now I'm going to give you an example of someone who told a really powerful story.
Thank you. I'm honored to be with you today for your commencement from one of the finest universities in the world. Truth be told, I never graduated from college, and this is the closest I've ever gotten to a college graduation. Today, I want to tell you 3 stories from my life. That's it. No big deal. Just 3 stories. The first story is about connecting the dots. I dropped out of Reed College after the first 6 months, but then stayed around as a drop-in for another 18 months or so before I really quit. So why did I drop out? It started before I was born. My biological mother was a young, unwed graduate student, and she decided to put me up for adoption. She felt very strongly that I should be adopted by college graduates, so everything was all set for me to be adopted at birth by a lawyer and his wife. Except that when I popped out, they decided at the last minute that they really wanted a girl. So my parents, who were on a waiting list, got a call in the middle of the night asking, "We've got an unexpected baby boy. Do you want him?" They said, "Of course." My biological mother found out later that my mother had never graduated from college and that my father had never graduated from high school. She refused to sign the final adoption papers. She only relented a few months later when my parents promised that I would go to college. This was the start in my life. And 17 years later, I did go to college. But I naively chose a college that was almost as expensive as Stanford. And all of my working class parents' savings were being spent on my college tuition. After 6 months, I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out. And here I was, spending all the money my parents had saved their entire life. So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay. It was pretty scary at the time, but looking back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me and begin dropping in on the ones that looked far more interesting. It wasn't all romantic. I didn't have a dorm room, so I slept on the floor in friends' rooms. I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits to buy food with. And I would walk the 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. I loved it. And much of what I stumbled into by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless later on. Let me give you one example. Reed College at that time offered perhaps the best calligraphy instruction in the country. Throughout the campus, every poster, every label on every drawer was beautifully hand calligraphed. Because I had dropped out and didn't have to take the normal classes, I decided to take a calligraphy class to learn how to do this. I learned about serif and sans serif typefaces, about varying the amount of space between different letter combinations, about what makes great typography great. It was beautiful, historical, artistically subtle in a way that science can't capture, and I found it fascinating. None of this had even a hope of any practical application in my life. But 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. And we designed it all into the Mac. It was the first computer with beautiful typography. If I had never dropped in on that single course in college, the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. And since Windows just copied the Mac, it's likely that no personal computer would have them. If I had never dropped out, I would have never dropped in on that calligraphy class, and personal computers might not have the wonderful typography that they do. Of course, it was impossible to connect the dots looking forward when I was in college, but it was very, very clear looking backwards 10 years later. Again, you can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path, and that will make all the difference. My second story is about love and loss. I was lucky. I found what I loved to do early in life. Woz and I started Apple in my parents' garage when I was 20. We worked hard, and in 10 years, Apple had grown from just the two of us in a garage into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees. We just released our finest creation, the Macintosh, a year earlier, and I just turned